It is two.
Tuesday.
Wow.
Did that
Wow.
just blow your eardrums? I
I'm
can't
so
hear
glad that
myself.
Chris went through your audio settings before you did that. Good job, Chris. Oh, welcome everybody. Uh,
Oh,
we have a big one today.
yeah, we have an intense one. This is the first time we're doing an episode like this, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. We just thought it was really important to do. So basically, we wanted to talk about what's going on in Ukraine right now, and the best angle we thought of was to look at the information that we've been hearing from our friends and family around the world and to kind of dive into the differences that we've been seeing in how different countries and different people are taking it, how news is broadcasting about it, uh,
Mm-hmm.
to dig into how to keep, a mental sanctuary, um, and the best ways to help. I don't know, is there anything I'm kind of
Yeah,
missing
I
there?
think that's pretty much it. I think right now we're in a situation where there's, depending on where you live, there is a like different levels of kind of exhausted fear, layered on top of a global pandemic, layered on top of 2 years of well-deserved social unrest for extremely important, pertinent reasons that should have been addressed a long time ago, or never happened at all, ideally. But um, it's one of those things where I think it warrants speaking about, and I think we need to caveat that, like most of you out there, it's a scary thing to even bring up because I don't know about you, Raquel, but I've been feeling very, saddened by the news that we naturally ingest by just geographically being in a certain place. Um, Taking on responsibility to not, as Kemi has said before, like not just to take the top news stories, not to click on clickbait, and then also to take that protection of self to say, and there's some really incredibly powerful quotes going around Instagram and social media right now that is, talking about something so devastating happening in one part of the world while we're living a relative life of luxury and abundance in other parts of the world, and that dichotomy is always happening somewhere. So we wanted to bring this up. We're trying some new things with the show. We want to insert some clips. We want to do some things. So bear with us on multiple levels. But if we don't do this, we're not being brave and living full, and you'll all just call us out as frauds. So we've got to keep pushing forward, doing
Just to
uncomfortable
keeping it
things.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think speaking of quotes going around and poems, I think, one side of things is when awful things are happening in the world, oftentimes beautiful art is created. And I kind of wanted to open the discussion with a poem I had seen written by Mary Andrew. And this was actually shared by Kate Bouchard, who is in episode 72. Definitely take a look at her episode. She's an incredible human being. But it says, I am washing my face before bed while a country is on fire. It feels dumb to wash my face, and dumb not to. It has never been this way, and it has always been this way. Someone has always clinked a cocktail glass in one hemisphere as someone loses a home in another, while someone falls in love in the same apartment building where someone grieves. The fact that suffering, mundanity, and beauty coincide is unbearable and remarkable. And that hit me so hard because that is so much how I've been feeling right now. And I think a lot of us um, have been feeling recently, at least in the comfort of Canada and North America.
And not everyone in Canada either, because there's so many people that aren't, well looked after in this country as well. It just
Of
becomes
course.
this exceptional, and I don't know about you. I would love to know, send us messages, how are you dealing with it? Like for me, I tend to freeze. I go into like a freeze mode. I've been through the denial mode. I've been through the kind of, I think we've all been through different points where, how do we help? And actually Tam's episode on actually dealing with the pandemic as another global kind of,
Hmm.
a massive incident on, that we're all watching now in real time, that it incites things that I don't know that we all acknowledge, you know,
Hmm.
baking sourdough, whatever that phase was, going out to help other people, seeing how do I help, how do I get involved, do, who do I need to try and get out of a country, who are my loved ones over there. So
Yeah, and I think actually to that point, and we'll get into this more later on in the episode as well, all of the coping mechanisms and things like that. But I did want to note, I just had a recent conversation with a friend of mine who is in kind of a position of unrest, like things are just going crazy in life. And I'm kind of in that same phase, and you're kind of, it's just like a very transitional phase. Um, and we were talking about how having some semblance of control really, really helps. It's one of the only
mm,
ways I know of to cope with a life where the external things around you are just so hard to control or predict.
mm,
I think in unpredictable times, controlling something as small as what you eat, and that's
mm,
where it comes down to people doing sourdough and doing crafts and things like that. Like, okay, yes, all of these things are happening in the world. What do I have control over in my life? How can
mm,
I bring back some semblance of sanity? um Maybe it's by working out 30 minutes a day. I don't know.
yeah,
You know, taking on a new hobby. So I think you're 100%, yeah, hitting the
yeah,
nail on the head with that one.
I just want to send that out to everybody, because we don't know what everyone's going through in different ways at different times. And again, when you take control, knowing that there never is control over anything, but take control of your behavior and your
Hmm.
responses. When you try and control others and try and bring people into, this is a very, very interesting time in the world where people are really looking to try and bring people over onto one side or another. And actually, I think, in a lot of the writing I've been doing recently, where society's built us that way. If you're in a 9 to 5 job, you are craving control because you've been given a structure, for your whole life. If you're in the gig-based economy, you're in a little bit of a different mindset because you've built these neural pathways to know that you're constantly hunting for your food. You're constantly, you're an entrepreneur. You know how to pivot really quickly. So just take stock of where you're at, because neither is right or wrong, but think about the systems that you're kind of living in right now. And if you are in a 9 to 5, it could be as easy as saying, well, not as easy, but it could be as simple as doing something within your work day that you add in to that
Hmm.
structure that allows you to feel a little bit better, or you have a conversation with someone who's in a position of, influence, that's able to help you have a little bit of time off if you need it. If you are an entrepreneur, and or someone like Raquel and I who work in multiple creative spheres, find your fire friends, have a conversation, ask what other people are doing, rest more, drink more water. Those little things that you can do that are self care, um, and actually for me it's self preservation.
Hmm.
Really is what it ends up being. But yeah, so yeah, it's a heavy start, but we want you to know that, you know it's sometimes not easy to articulate, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. So
Hmm.
that's what we're doing today. And if it gives you a little bit of a moment to say, okay, I'm going to look at some different news from a different part of the world, or, you know, if it gives you some ideas and also helps you to feel like it's okay to not know everything, then we've done our job today.
And that is, I think, a really good segue into, you know, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that Christina and I are both fairly international people. Christina grew up all over the world. She travels a lot, maybe since the pandemic, but always since then or
Now it's your
before then.
turn.
Now it's my turn. I'm constantly traveling. And with that, you have the beautiful experience of meeting people around the world. And if you're open to it, you have the beautiful opportunity to learn from different aspects of life, different people's histories, what makes them think the way they do, cultural
Mm.
differences. And those are so important. And I think that comes right through to how news is reported on.
Mm.
And so that's where we kind of wanted to start. I noticed when, all of this started with the war in Ukraine, I had spoken to some people back in Amsterdam. Um, and I was really interested to hear that while, of course, they were sad and thought what was happening was awful, they didn't seem as fearful. And I felt,
Mm.
I'm in Canada right now, so I'm hearing mostly Canadian news. Um, I felt very fearful. All of a sudden, like, I'm leaving in 40 days, or sorry, 20 days
Mm.
to Tanzania, and I have to fly through Amsterdam. And I was like, should I not be flying? Because all I'm hearing is missiles this and bombs that, and this and that. And it made me feel very unsettled for family and friends, but also to travel. Um, and family and friends in the Netherlands were still planning to travel themselves within Europe. So I was like, wow, that's gotta be, you have to be hearing something different from me.
North America has I mean, tiny segue is into pop culture, media culture, how we report the what's fantastic reporting styles. So we pulled some clips from different parts of the world. We did actually, I will caveat and say, I did not find other language clips. I'm sure there is a lot of real richness if you have places that are different language, different cultures, but we didn't make that time to translate those for this particular episode. But if you can find translations from different parts of the world and it's accessible to you, then please do. But North America, when I first moved here and I watched the news, it felt like a movie compared
Hmm.
to, it feels like a blockbuster is happening every time I look at the news in the States. And if you watch, Kemi was the one that taught me to watch, not just your mainstream news on one side, but like left wing, right wing, censure, all of these other different news sources, and they're fantastical, typically, and that's a storytelling style. And in the UK, I think culturally, it's got such a strong history of war. People are It's so much closer. The European Union is just such I mean, relatively new, but the interconnectedness of all of these very distinct countries in such a close proximity, I think dampens the storytelling style out of fantastical compared to the
Hmm.
US. But there are so many other, like someone said the other day, a country that was started in how Westerners know it as America, when the pioneers arrived, they were Puritans. The religion was very strict. The religion is very like rigid, and punitive measures could you could argue that is a part of those years ago when it was when the nation was kind of taken, um, and that's impacted the storytelling style. And same with Hong Kong. Hong Kong, we have a clip coming from Hong Kong as well, which, to be fair, is an individual's perspective, but the different types of lenses people use to tell stories is very interesting to look at and hard to escape, because you can't, if you don't live in the UK or you don't live in Hong Kong, you're not taking in, um, who you haven't vetted over time who are reliable media sources. You haven't been able to do that. So finding random clips from around the world can also be difficult. So anyway, we're not giving you very many answers here. We're like, it's,
No, but I
yeah.
think what you're touching on is, I think what you're trying to talk about is how do you go through and how do you vet different media? And
Mm,
I think that that is a really important point. So I'm just going to say right off the bat, for me, I try to stay very fluid. And what I mean by that, I try to stay fluid when I read or watch news or when I hear anecdotal evidence.
mm,
I will take it in from multiple sources,
mm-hmm,
and then I will remind myself that I don't know what's happening in that country because I am not there.
mm,
So when I take it in from multiple sources, from multiple countries, from multiple people who read and look into and are interested in different news sources, I look for the similarities and I
mm-hmm,
say, okay, if all of these people from all of these different countries and all of these walks of life and different beliefs from me are saying these same key pieces, there's probably some truth in that. I can probably bet that there's some truth in that.
mm-hmm.
And then I look at the differences and I start looking at historical means. And we'll do that when we look at some of the clips later in this episode. Okay, so why is this country doing, saying this? Why is the news in this place saying this? Why are people's sentiments different here? Okay, let's look at the history. Okay, I see why there could be, a
Mm,
different read of the situation.
mm-hmm,
So I don't think that there's ever one truth. That's my personal belief. There is no one true fact. There are multiple
mm.
truths from multiple people, and everyone has their own truths. So um, I think I just urge people when they listen to the news, they look at what's going on, you have your values that will tell you what's right and wrong, but keep in mind that there's always going to be multiple truths to every story from every
Mm-hmm.
angle.
Agreed.
And, unless we're there, we truly don't know exactly what's happening. We might have a good idea and reporting from people, but we'll never know, every piece of it.
Mm.
Um, okay. So I think you pulled up something from Canada. So just to give you guys the heads up, we're going to pull up clips from Canadian news, the UK, which I'm going to get Christina with her beautiful accent to read over the article that was written. um, and then we're going to hit HK, so Hong Kong, and then we've got South Africa. And then we'll kind of go into some anecdotal clips from people in different countries as well. Do you want to start with your clip?
Yeah.
The primary consideration is saving Ukraine and the Ukrainian people by suffocating Russia and its government. That's what we are trying to do, and I think Canadians will understand that. We'll
Even
be
if they lose their job. And with no disrespect, because I take your point, Canadians are united in the pushback against what Russia is doing.
well,
But even if they lose their job.
I would say that the cost to Canada and Canadians and our economy of not doing something is far greater than the cost of these sanctions that we are imposing and will continue to impose. The cost of a world war is huge. The cost, if we lose our international rules-based order, is huge. The cost to Canadian freedoms is huge if we don't do these things. Will there be costs? I expect something. Can I speculate on exactly what they are? Not at this time. We'll be monitoring everything as we go. But the reality is, the more we get these sanctions out, the faster we're able to cripple that economy. The faster we're able to do that, we will be able to lighten that load. But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
So the thing that struck me when I was looking through news with that particular clip is that the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs is the person speaking, Rob Oliphant, and for me, there are if I'm trying to be very objective in something that is almost impossible to be objective with, you have economic impact, you have emotional impact, you have social impact, you have, you know, international impact, like relational impact, right, between countries. And I think one of the reasons that I'm so set on education on a macro and micro level is because when I studied macro and microeconomics and international trade, and as part of an international relations like sidebar for my degree, it gives you a perspective of understanding who could potentially be at risk, financially at risk, in the short term and then in the long term. And so this conversation, this clip to me was interesting because it gave me a moment of realizing that we have to place so much trust in our government, which requires us to now, everyone, to be way more politically active, even if you don't want to be, to take the time to know what's going on, but also understand that there are always more, that there's, even though politicians can be very, they can talk very much around the houses so that no one accuses them, takes a soundbite that is, you know, divisive, or maybe it's intended to be. My point is, that allowed me to see the potential impact in my neighborhood, in my local community, you know, in the country that I'm currently I'm settled on. But it also gave me an understanding that the Canadian government are looking to articulate as best as possible and balance between the long-term and the short-term impact. And so that piece gave me it didn't give me confidence or dread. It didn't do any of those things. It just gave me perspective. So that's why I pulled that.
What I want to note about that clip as well is the fact that world wars, like World War III, is being brought up a lot. And that's something I've noticed in Canadian news a lot, is this is not being reported on as a war in Ukraine. This is being reported on as a war against democracy, and it's being reported on as a war that could very easily tumble into a world war. And that, I don't know, for me, that is very fear driving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah.
That verbiage is, and again, thanks to that business degree, thanks to microeconomics and macroeconomics, you know, it's like anything. When you know, I think a depression is a number of terms in recession. I can't remember if it's 3 or 4. And the easiest way to dive into a depression is when you hit one recession and then the fearmongering starts. People pull their purse strings, people stop spending. The government is saying everyone's got to spend money, but we don't have money. Like, things are hard, times are tough. People start to go, oh, well, I better save. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to do these things. We are the makers of our destiny in this situation in a lot of ways. Now, I'm interested in how social media will intercept and pop culture intercepts. Like, I read something the other day about how the BTS army is like donating a whole bunch of tickets. And, you know, the fact that BTS has so much political power for the people who follow BTS. I mean, I love BTS.
BTS.
The Korean pop group. Sorry, to be
okay.
Just for those who don't love BTS, you're welcome. Dynamite. Start with Dynamite, and then Smooth Like Butter, I think, is the other one that I love. Anyway, but it's just interesting now, because this is the first time in the world in the last probably maybe 10 years, pandemic inclusive, as we've never had such access to instant, or many of us, to instant communication, instant data, instant news stories. We're just completely overwhelmed by it in real time. So as a result, we also have these massive tech giants, these people behind the scenes and these organizations behind the scenes that have exceptional power and influence. And we're using these supercomputers to put our hands up, to protest, to right? To share
Yeah.
information, to conflate information. So that was,
Yeah,
that's
and
number
I
one for
just
me.
want to like take a note on that. It's a bit of a segue from us doing the news articles, but I just think this is a really important note. I'm also seeing, because we're looking at changes in time, so I'm thinking about 9/11, for example, and I'm kind of comparing it to that, because that's one of the last times I remember my parents and grandparents having the news on just around the clock. Like, I just remember the cycle of the news, like all throughout the day. And this is what I'm seeing again right now, but it's through our phones, it's on social media, it's, you know, popping up as news pop-ups and breaking news stories. If you follow any of the newspapers, you know, it's really pervasive. It's definitely everywhere. But I'm also seeing a really different and kind of cool thing, which is companies standing up. Over the last number of years, a lot of people have been calling to companies, millennials and Gen Zs predominantly,
Yeah.
have been saying companies need to step up and act. So this has been, we've seen this through Black Lives Matter, we've seen this through like Asian hate crimes, we've seen this through, you know, just eco, like being green, representation, you name it. So that I'm actually seeing a huge trend in companies matching donations internally, and I don't even think that they're advertising this externally, but I'm hearing from a lot of friends who have who work for companies that are global, where they're asking employees if they want to donate, they will match that, blah blah blah. And some of these companies are like already hitting $1 million and more that they're donating, which is incredible. So it's very interesting to see how, you know, companies are taking a stand, and we are seeing a difference between them being this inanimate object and almost being a true human and brand.
Well, Larry reminded me the other day, often we forget that corporations are treated like people.
Exactly.
They're
Yes.
a person. Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't know the history. Another fascinating sidebar that we won't get into, but the history of why incorporations exist and how they are structured is something that I think in the next 5 years we're going to be. I mean, that's another conversation. We'll talk about that another time.
Let's do an episode on that. That's actually, that's interesting.
The history of incorporations.
We'll do an
of corporations. Anyway, we're just showing our nerds.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So I wanted to bring up my homework was for the UK. I brought up a clip from BBC, and I'm gonna get Christina, like I said, because of her beautiful accent, to read it. But you will also be seeing the visuals that were associated with this. So I just wanted to make that clear. If you're listening to this, you can go to our YouTube where you'll actually see the footage. This article was put out as a standalone article with a video in it. And I, coming from a communications background, I'll talk after about how important it is that that video was actually there on a persuasive standpoint. So take it away.
For months, President Vladimir Putin denied he would invade his neighbor, but then he tore up a peace deal and unleashed what Germany calls Putin's war, pouring forces into Ukraine's north, east, and south. As the number of dead climbs, Russia's leader stands accused of shattering peace in Europe. What happens next could jeopardize the continent's entire security structure. Why have Russian troops attacked? In a pre-dawn TV address on 24th of February, President Putin declared Russia could not feel safe, develop, and exist because of what he claimed was a constant threat from modern Ukraine. Immediately, airports and military headquarters were attacked. Then tanks and troops rolled in from Russia. Russian-annexed Crimea and its ally, Belarus. Now, warplanes have bombed major cities, and Russian forces have seized control of key southern port city Kherson. Russia refuses to use the terms war or even invasion. Many of its leaders' justifications for it were false or irrational. He claimed his goal was to protect people subjected to bullying and genocide and aim for the demilitarization demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. There has been no genocide in Ukraine. It is a vibrant democracy led by a president who is Jewish. How could I be a Nazi? Said Vladimir Zelensky, who likened Russia's onslaught to Nazi Germany's invasion in World War II. Ukraine's chief rabbi and the Auschwitz Memorial have also rejected Russia's slur.
So the reason that I pulled this one was twofold. The BBC has tons and tons of amazing reporting, but I wanted to come from a persuasive communication standpoint and point out a couple of things. One of the big things was the video that you will have watched if you're watching this YouTube version. In there, you will see bombings, you're going to see a lot of the terrorization that is happening in Ukraine at the time of this article being put out. That's important because those videos are going to have a very, very strong persuasive effect on the reader. It's also very, very fear-inducing. So I wanted to make that clear because the emotions that you're going to feel through watching that and reading this are going to be very, very strong for most people. I also wanted to point out some of the terms that were being used just so we know. And this, just to be clear, I don't have a standpoint on this being bad or wrong. I just want to be clear that it's happening. So using terms like pouring forces into the Ukraine, talking about jeopardizing the continent's entire security structure, these are very real, but they're also very fear-inducing. So when you're going through this, this is not just facts. The way that it's written is meant to make people fearful. And I just think that's really, really important to touch on. And that kind of leads me into how newspapers are paid. So it used to be that newspapers were paid through kind of like a half-half advertising and subscriptions. Now we know with it going online, very few newspapers are subscription-based. You can get a lot of those articles for free, which means a lot of the funding will also have national funding as well, or provincial, depending on the level of the news. But a lot of the funding actually comes from advertising. So I think it's really important for everyone to be very clear on that, because a lot of the driving force of journalism now is to get the clicks and to get them first and to put out tons of content and put it out quickly. Mm-hmm. That is not to say that there's not good content. That is not to say that it's not important to read it. I will say the BBC has an incredible page, actually, with a bit of an archetype where you can click through on different sections and they'll give you good information on, understanding what's happening with the war holistically. Why is everyone worried about it? How did it start? What's the history? And you can click through at your own pace and read those. So this is by no means me putting down the BBC, because I think they're great. I just do think that it's very important when you're thinking about taking care of your mental health to be aware that with extreme commentary, we are also more inclined to be fearful and then continue clicking, which increases their income as well. So just be very careful as you read that to make sure you know and your body knows what's happening. And, that's going to also spike your cortisol as you read that and as you watch that. So be very aware and try to be very, how can I even say this? I think just be soft with yourself. Be aware of what's going on in your body. Have that mind-body connection as you're reading these, and really give yourself some grace as you go through them.
I don't know if you've ever done anything similar or if dance has anything similar, but in for me as an actor, there are a lot of different methods, but I will often breathe in a character and breathe them out at the end of the day.
How?
And it can be as simple as having a conversation. I often find if I touch the parts of my body, like I'll touch my heart, I'll touch my stomach, and I've used it before with difficult information or things that I have to read that are tough for me. And I'll say, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to, like, I always say we, because I'm like, this is, my head is different to my heart is different to my gut. So I'm like, okay, team, we're gonna take this information in, and then we're gonna breathe it out. And you can use whatever feels good for you. Ocean has taught me a couple of techniques. One of our previous guests, who is exceptional at releasing body trauma. But just an exhale. Like, people freak out when they hear me for the first time doing that, like, thing really loudly. But that's releasing. So if you have something, I know that I can take a deep breath in, hold it for a few seconds, exhale for longer than I inhale, and let it go. You're just regulating your system in a really small way.
I love that. Actually, you saying that reminded me, in yoga, we'll often do an inhale, a hold, and then like a horse out. So you would go like, and it just like forces your whole body to loosen up.
relax.
And you'll often do that in a forward fold. So
nice.
yeah, that's another good one. And I will say that it definitely, especially after a hard posture, will help me release the tension I'm holding. And usually with a hard posture, I'm holding on to a difficult thought. So I could definitely see how that would work well with this as well.
Visualization helps, depending on what your sensory kind of highlighters are, I guess I should say. Figure it out, try a few different things. Try dancing to BTS Dynamite. I actually narrated an audiobook recently called Dancing is the Best Medicine. Highly recommend it. It's very fun. I mean, the voice is obviously.
No, you know what I'm just thinking is, like, everyone knows from me now, I get majority of my information from audio or from podcasts. So I'm like, I heard in this podcast once, and everyone's like, yeah, the podcast. You're just like, you're narrating all these books, so everything's coming from these audiobooks.
Yeah. It's true.
This is how we're informed.
So should we go into the Hong Kong one?
Let's do it.
Okay. And that
there was this family walking in the park when there was, like, obviously bombings all around, and there was a father's Ukrainian and mother's Russian, and we all know that this is a very tense moment between the Russians and Ukrainians. But his father and mother bringing the half Ukrainian, half Russian daughter, like, enjoying the sunshine playing with pigeons in Kiev. And I think this is a very touching moment for me. And he doesn't care about race and nationality or even the war, because he thinks the love of life is the most important for all.
So we get this opinion piece. For context, this is reposted on the South China Morning Post news channel on YouTube. And South China Morning Post is an English-speaking news, like, media outlet. And Mr. Ng is a reporter on the ground in Ukraine, a photojournalist, I should say, really focused on the individual and the family. And I think what really stood out to me about this was, for those of you who don't know, Hong Kong has a strong background of protesting, has not always had, we don't necessarily all see eye to eye with mainland China. I'm not going to get into all of the politics of that, but freedom of speech is different in different countries. And so therefore media and news reporting has to be very careful, because you don't necessarily, it's a different mechanism for you to report, a structure for you to report in. For example, with the States, it's like you've got this roasting culture, and you have this culture of people really pointing fingers and getting very strong and having very, very strong opinions about the government. And as you can tell with this piece, there's tinkling piano music. It's a little bit calmer. This person is focusing on on the fact that there is a political issue, but focusing on the individuals, and using this piece of media to highlight humanity. And I just really liked that, because this person is not a representative of South China Morning Post necessarily. And when the South China Morning Post does post, there are political opinions. They do report the news. But I think it's important to find some of these as well, where you have someone who is over there doing something, taking photos, having conversations. And that I really enjoyed the storytelling in that particular piece and that particular moment.
Yeah, what a stark difference between the two like last ones we just looked at. One with the bombings and very, very fear driven, and then this one with the tinkling piano and the beautiful expose on a family, a normal family, and a reminder that we are a global world. Ukraine is a global country, and there are many, many Russians residing in Ukraine with
44 million people.
Yeah, with loving families, and yeah, the differences of leaders does not always trickle down to the differences of the people. I think that's
it often doesn't. So there's that one, and then you have one from South Africa. And for those of you who don't know, Africa has a different stance than a lot of the West.
Frightening, agonizing, and extremely chaotic. That's how some South Africans have described their experience when fleeing from war-torn Ukraine. They say they also had to deal with the ugly scene of racism at the border.
We escaped on Saturday, which was the 26th.
No, Friday morning.
Yeah, early morning.
Friday,
we escaped, which took us 4 days to travel. 4 days. Even the traveling alone was a problem. Trains were 24 hours. Trains were heavily crowded.
We had no money. We had to hustle for money to try and get taxis to get to the border.
Even taking a taxi was very risky, because cars are a target.
Very, very risky. And the racism that we really experienced at the border was so terrible. I think we waited 6 hours in the cold of temperatures of -3, waiting to get assistance, because we felt like our government didn't do enough to communicate to the embassies to let us through.
I really wanted to pull this clip. There were a number to pull. Again, if you're on the YouTube version of this, you will see the clip itself, in which on the news you can see a little side banner which has an exclamation that the South African government says it cannot take sides in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And we'll get into that in a second. There's a lot of pushback. The EU, Canada, North America are all putting a lot of pressure on South Africa to take a stance within NATO against Russia. And South Africa right now is somewhat remaining neutral. I added a couple other articles here. One of them was also an opinion piece. We don't need to play it, but I will add it to the show notes because I think it gives a well-rounded view of what's happening. I had spoken to some friends and family in South Africa to see what the news was reporting there, and that's what actually got me interested in digging into the background of what's going on. And they were saying, they were really surprised. They knew that the war was happening and that other countries were really worried about it, but they said that they hadn't really heard much about it and people weren't really talking about it. And so that made me really curious. And this goes back to that idea of, instead of saying, well, what's wrong with them? Why are they not reporting on this? To dig in and say, what is happening here? What is the past? So I did. I looked into it. And what I found is that there is a lot of, I think it goes back over the last 30 years where Russia empowered through giving weapons. They empowered the apartheid war. So they empowered the people of South Africa. And so now you have what is a bit of a racially charged issue again. Nothing new to South Africa, nothing new to Africa in general. But I think this is even more inflamed because we're seeing reports of a lot of African students who have gone to the Ukraine for school, who are being pushed to the backs of lines, not allowed on buses, and having a hard time escaping the country. And that's what we're seeing reports of in the news in South Africa, at least from what I could find. Again, this is just a snippet that I looked for. I am not a native, so I'm sure there are different newscasts that show different viewpoints. And one of the articles here is exactly that. It's, basically saying that this is a huge failure on the part of South Africa, and an international tragedy, that they're not weighing in and saying this is wrong and being upset with what's happening from Russia's side. The other issue is I think it's something like 50% of ammunition and weapons come from Russia. So that's a huge piece, as well as bread. So they're actually going to be, Africa in general is going to be heavily impacted by this war, whether they weigh in or not. So you have the Russians who are, the Russian government, I should say, who is kind of building on the relationship that they've had over the last 30 years and solidifying that relationship, which is making it very difficult for Africa to kind of step away. And also just emotionally, I think a lot of Africa is siding with Russia based on their history. So you do have a big mixture, and again, like I said, that's nothing new for South Africa. You do oftentimes have a very polarized views of things that are happening within their own country and within the world. But I thought that was really, really interesting and really important to look at that history, because that was something I had no idea of.
I didn't either. I when I read that, again, when I read that piece, watched that clip, one of the big things that I'm recognizing is the impact on individual level and how that can inform a very charged opinion about and potentially a very divisive opinion. So when you hear that, and again, I dislike bringing up the pandemic and the mandates and the way that people have been treated and have been behaving during the pandemic. I am not a fighter, which is why I did not continue in my studies in politics and law, because I realized that I feel much more participatory in society when I have perspective. And that can often mean that while I've said this analogy multiple times, while we're so busy looking at our plate, it's hard to see what's growing in the garden, and that I've used in the creative and the gig-based economy, but it also pertains to digesting news, information sources, having structured conversations, having arguments. Raquel and I disagree on many things, and we have instead focused right from the beginning of this podcast on creating a safe space to allow those disagreements to help us to inform, but also to speak to each other through a lens of safety and not feeling like the other person's opinion is invalid. And I think that's a really important thing to take away from these recent clips, like just in the order, the context of if someone has helped you to reach independence, if a government has helped another government to reach an independence that was systemically oppressive, that was extraordinarily intergenerationally traumatic, and will be for generations to come, who am I, who has never been in South Africa, who is not of African descent, to place my lens onto theirs and explain why that's not enough? I can understand that I may feel that way, and I can take the time to offer other perspective, but not with an intention to change theirs. And I think that therein lies the issue with politics and with law, is that someone has to make a decision at some point. Someone has to say, you know what, your plate's empty, but this garden is going to die, and we can't put something on your plate right now. We can put something on that person's plate, but we can't put something on yours. That is a very difficult thing to understand, let alone accept, right? But again, and when you're dealing with a global economy, global relations, there is never going to be, in the near future, hopefully one day there may be, a space where everyone does have, in quote unquote, enough. And we're working towards that. But that is true, in my opinion, that's true kind of collectivism. And we have a lot of work to do, friends, before, and we can do it. But this is a beginning. This is the beginning of saying, I need to listen. And perfect example with me and Raquel, we have moments where we will listen all the way down the road until there comes a point where someone gets what they want and someone doesn't. But because we're used to doing that and we understand, we've established the greater context, that is not as big a pain point. Now, I don't want to compare that. I just did, and I'm very sorry that I did compare it to a global crisis. But I can only make a decision based on my internal individual behavior. So when I think that way, the reason I did make that comparison for full context is because that allows me to understand how I would like to step into approaching this crisis. And then I take the next step and say, well, what can I do? What can I control? How can I be supportive? And the first thing in my opinion, is you can do your best to educate yourself on the situation. I read about more things than I think I would have liked to, but doing that and coming away from it and saying I didn't just take what was easily in front of me or take someone else's opinion. And the same, I'm going to say the same thing with politics. When you vote, take a few minutes and do your own research. Don't just ask your friend what they're voting for. And I've done it. We've all done it. What and who they're voting for. So, take that.
Yeah. I think that's very well said. I think when I talked earlier about being fluid and listening lightly, that's exactly what I was referring to, is the ability to hear people's side of the story, hear different countries' input, hear what different media are saying, and not add it to your backpack. Let's put it that way. You don't need to put it in your backpack, and you don't need to carry that on. You can learn and you can become more and more educated, but you don't need to take that with you and put it on your own shoulders, especially when you don't have control, and especially when you don't actually have that lived experience. I think that is so, so important. So with that, we also asked a few of our friends from around the world to weigh in on how things are going from their perspective in their parts of the world. There may be a couple more that are added before this is released, but I'll start with the ones that I currently have. So we have Heather from the US, who is actually one of my best friends in the world. So I'll start with hers first.
Within US news networks, we're seeing, both conservative and liberal outlets showing what's actually happening in Ukraine. Some conservative networks are still choosing to blame Biden for what's going on, while more liberal ones are showing that the US is doing everything we can to help Ukraine without sending soldiers there. I would say the level of fear is probably pretty high, at least within my immediate circle. We're not sure what Putin's going to do next, but we do believe that if we send U.S. soldiers in, it would end up leading to nuclear war. The mental toll is pretty high, at least for me. It's been rough, like it has been for, I'm sure, many other people in the world. Something that's helping, though, is donating to legitimate organizations, making sure these organizations are getting war supplies to soldiers, first aid kits are going out to civilians, and food banks are being replenished for civilians and refugees.
I love that one. I love that message. Focus on the social. Focus on the social impact.
Yeah, what's in your control. And we'll dig into some helpful ways that you can donate or, show support later in the episode as well. Mm-hmm. Next, I'm going to bring up Kemi, who was also on the podcast, and we've mentioned her a couple times. I can't remember what episode number she was, but you should go back. She talked about COVID, but a lot of what she spoke about was also finding good information. So it's a fantastic episode for this as well, because it'll help you kind of get through all of the noise and cut down to the nitty gritty.
Episode 4.
She was a baby episode. We need to have her back on. Okay.
Good morning. Lovely chatting with you. So I have been keeping up with the news a lot on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, mostly through podcasts that I listen to. So I listen to daily news podcasts, and I do a lot of reading, but I unfortunately don't listen to or watch a lot of my sort of news from Canada. So just like on TV, because I don't have cable. So, but definitely, I feel like the news I listen to kind of goes in detail, has people on the ground in Ukraine, interviewing actual people in Ukraine. So it's a really interesting perspective. I highly recommend listening to some of the past weeks, the daily podcast from the New York Times and like the Washington Post podcast or the Economist podcast. All have great one-on-one interviews with people in Ukraine right now, which is crazy. So basically a lot of what I'm hearing on the news is, what's happening on the ground in Ukraine and all these different events that are unfolding throughout the week. It's harrowing. When I'm out and about, I don't really hear a lot about it, but I do feel like when I'm online, it's scary. So, I read a lot of Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, and the vibe on Twitter in like the West is crazy. Like, we're super afraid of nuclear war, and people just have hot takes every single day going back and forth, which is great if you really want to be immersed in it and really keeping up with everything going on. You can follow, the Ukrainian president, and you can follow a lot of people who really, journalists who are really into it. So it's good, but it's also bad because it's like it heightens your fear about the whole thing.
Thank you, Kemi. She had remarkable tips, and we're gonna talk about them more as well later on. I think the daily news podcasts is a great tip because it's something you can listen to and it ends. I think for your mental health, for keeping that mental sanctuary while still being, a good socially conscious citizen, it is so important to be able to listen and to be able to turn it off at a point. So I think that is really important. She listed out some really good places to go and podcasts to listen to, so we'll add that to the show notes. And yeah, what did you think, Christina?
Yeah, exactly that. I always enjoy listening to Kemi because just her voice is measured. So, and I'm grateful to both people for sharing their input. And I think that is part of one of the biggest things I take away is when someone I trust and we've had an in-depth conversation with, I know they have educational influence for me. They have what is it called? Referential influence for me because Kemi is a very good friend of yours, and they have personal impact with me. With those three things, I can look a little bit less. I can trust that you have done the work. I can trust that another person has done the work, and I think taking that those things like the daily, those little tips and tricks, I now, as a result of knowing my relationship with that person and my trust in that person or that source, I can then go ahead and add that to my arsenal of, I suppose that's a terrible pun to use right now, but my toolbox of things that I would like to use in terms of, I love that term, protecting my mental sanctuary, because we do have so much conflict going on right now, and I do want to just reiterate to everyone out there, if you are feeling like it's too much, that is valid. If you are feeling like you don't want to look at anything one day, that is valid. And I think if you need to reach out to people, we always talk about sharing from the scar and not the wound. When the wound time is reaching out to safe, trusted sources who are people, whether it's your counselor, whether it's an online health service, whether it is a trusted friend who will be objective and will not project their own worries and concerns at the time. Finding your mental sanctuary blocks. I really encourage all of us to continue to do that, and sometimes taking a big breath and letting it go and asking yourself if what you're intending to do is really the best thing for you in this moment. That can be really powerful, because we can also now, because we're attached to our phones, we can reach for our phone to try and solve a problem. Our brains want to solve problems, whereas our heart might need a minute, our guts might need a minute, our body might need a minute. And I think it's important to take that breath before you make a decision that could take you down another rabbit hole. So I just wanted to put that out, and I think Kemi covers that really well with her own lived experience of it.
Yeah, I agree. We have one more from Maru, who is actually a good friend of Kemi's, and she is in Colombia. So we have a bit of a point from Colombia as well.
Hi, Raquel. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your podcast. I'm really honored to be speaking about this very important issue with you and give you a little bit of my perspective. I have to be honest, I have not kept with the news. I have a reason for it. I want to explain it now. And the reason is because it's very polarized here in Colombia. I live in the city of Barranquilla. That's the northern coast of Colombia. It's a very becoming city in the last few years. It has grown a lot. The pandemic also hit really hard here because we received about 1 million refugees from Venezuela during the pandemic in the country of Colombia, and about 50,000, I believe, came to Barranquilla. And well, that took a toll on the economy, and this was hard to watch. I know it doesn't have anything to do with Ukraine, but the refugees, they started yelling on the streets. They just started yelling. Well, I'm gonna say it in Spanish. I can translate later. But they said, "Madre, padre, cualquier ayuda para comida para nuestros hijos." They just said like, "Mother or father, please help us. We need money for our kids, food, and to survive." And as a Colombian, I've been used to seeing people, ask for coins or a little extra help on the street, but this was something completely new to me. Overwhelming.
Okay. So important, right? Like understanding the biases or the potential biases of your news, of your country. Biases are human. They're human. Everyone has biases. No matter who you are, you have biases. We just need to be aware of which biases so that we can take the step forward in evolution and check ourselves. So I think that's super, super important. What were you going to say?
What else is happening?
Yeah.
That was just a huge thing. Like we've talked about it all throughout. There are a lot of things happening, and we can't know all of it. We can't. I mean, it's too much. So acknowledging how you're feeling about other things that are happening in your world, other issues that are going on. These are all adding to this, this human water glass that's just getting filled up more and more and more and more and more. And at some point it is going to spill over, depending on what your coping mechanisms are during times of high stress. So again, I think really what it comes down to for us is, look at different sources, find things from different parts of the world, talk with trusted friends and colleagues, but without the intention to bring people over to a side. Recognize that people's lived experiences are not yours to own, but they're also not yours to judge, and build mentally. My dad says it so well. He's always like, when I'm in a really high stress mode, he's like, find the time to laugh. Put on a comedy. You don't have to feel obligated to watch, everything happening. And I really don't enjoy shocking films. I don't enjoy, those sorts of things. People have different outlets. Know what yours is and find a way to, how would Shea Emery say it? Ventilate. Find your way to ventilate.
I think the other thing that Maru said that I thought was really, really important, I just want to touch on before we move past that, is the danger of having misinformation. Specifically, the danger of misinformation being passed on from people you trust. So I will say, within the persuasive communications science world, that is something that is actually quite heavily researched. We do know, and we've known for many years now, that where you get your information will be quickly forgotten, and the information or the story will stay with you. So we are a story-based community. That is how we learn things. It's a very, very, very powerful tool of persuasion. And of course, news is all story. So, there has been experiments in the past where you take people on completely opposite political spectrums. You've got a left wing and a right wing, and they mixed them. So they said, okay, the left wings are going to get right wing news and the right wings are going to get left wing news. And we're going to do a long study and see what happens.
Wow.
And they knew. It wasn't like it was hidden as, right wing news for the left wing person. No, they knew they were getting right wing. What would happen is at first, the results recorded were saying, this is BS, blah, 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 I don't agree with it. Over time, what they saw happening was people were actually relaying news they read in the right-wing side for the left-wing people. So basically the opposite side, and not remembering where that information came from. How many times have you had it where you remember a quote, a story, an anecdotal situation, but you don't remember who told you or where you read it? So it's very, very, very important, if you're getting information from other people, that you either let it go, listen to it, have your emotional response and let it go, or that you look into it further and just double check for yourself, if that is legitimate. So I think, there are certain people that you're going to say, okay, I trust this person. I know what their methods are of recruiting good news, and that's fine too. I think if you have that, that's great. But if it's from like Aunt Becky and Uncle Jerry, vet it or let it go. That would be my recommendation.
Agreed. Agreed.
Uncle Jerry.
Uncle Jerry Springer.
Okay, we've already talked about news cycles.
I think we're at the point where is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, there is. There was a couple more things. So I wanted to talk about walking the fine line between socially conscious advocate and creating a mental sanctuary. We touched on that a couple times, but I wanted to pull it all into one section. The daily news podcasts that Kemi mentioned, I think those are so powerful and are a good way to actually turn it off. Having time blocks, news time blocks, I would recommend not doing it in the morning, because then it can hijack your emotions, and hijack your mind. So if you were to set, let's say, a time block in the afternoon or the evening, or do it while you're taking a walk, or maybe listen to it and then take a walk, so that you can kind of have that movement to let it go physically and mentally and emotionally. That is another important thing. Journaling is another tool you can use if you're finding that it's doing the wheel in your brain and you can't turn it off. Try to actually just get it out of your head. Journal it out, draw it out, let it go. Workout, again, get the movement, get your body healthy, kind of set the stage. And then if you need to, maybe it might need some more research. Sometimes things cycle in our heads because we have this ongoing question that we're not having answered. If that's the case for you, it may actually mean that you need to deep dive. So figure out what works for you, but I think these are some good tips to keep a healthy mental sanctuary while still being invested in what's happening in the world and to Ukraine.
I always go back to my morning mindset routine at these
Of course you do.
I always do. And
I think it's a good tool for right now, for sure.
I think developing your own, I've had so many people now say, oh, can you send me your morning mindset routine? And I'm like, I can send you what I do, but I really hope you build what works for you. I really hope you build the thing that, and I think I would add to that, I love all of those things. I love the time blocking. I love the, acknowledging whether you want to walk before or after. I mean, can we all just not turn to our phones and let the rest of the world into bed with us straight away? for a minute, because picking up, and I know that people do it, and I know that some people really do they do their meditation on their phone, which I do as well. So I know this isn't an overall thing, but challenge yourself to do something that you normally wouldn't, and actually see and take a step back and say, now, was that really better for me? Did I really feel better, or did I actually feel worse? And give it some time, because right now we're whatever happens, we are already very deeply entrenched into, and we are about to be catapulted involuntarily into normalizing a very new, elastic way of thinking as a way of surviving across alternate currencies and verses, as in the metaverse, the Web3. We have all of these different existences, our social media presence, our filters and campaigns, and all of these things that are coming at us in ways that we are really, and we're being approached on different senses. So just be aware of what your senses are right now, because the education system is not, in my opinion, multi-sensory. So check in with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And before I move on to the last bit, I will say what really works for me is if I go on a walk and I create a space for myself to be super present. And I do that by letting everything go and naming the different senses in that moment. Can I feel the wind blow my hair across my face? Can I feel, and I'll go to lighter and lighter and lighter sensations. So can I feel the friction of my pants on my legs? Can I feel the sponginess of my shoes underneath my toes? Can I hear children laughing, 2 blocks away? That's going to bring you into the present, which will be a really, really good way for a lot of people to let go and realize what is actually happening with their body. Until you can kind of do that, you probably will have a difficult time understanding what kind of a toll this takes. So last little bit, I'll go through this really quickly. This is actually an excerpt from CBC, but I wanted to note it and not just put it in the show notes, although it will be there as well. So thank you to the CBC for this. But this is actually about how you can help and where you can donate, which is something that we talked about earlier. So according to Kate Ban, who's the managing director of Charity Intelligence Canada, an organization that researches charities and aims to help people make informed decisions about where to donate, it's best to avoid sending boxes of donations. I just thought this was really important to touch on. Says getting food or clothing delivered to the Ukraine is a logistical nightmare. So super, super important. This is something that they also said in Tanzania. The ports are closing, the highways too. Getting trucks and lorries and air shipments into the Ukraine is just not possible at this time. Most supplies are not likely to make it to the region or will end up in landfills, and people who were better off or could have been better off will not receive them. Rather, donate money directly to charities instead. You want to make sure that your money gets into the Ukraine quickly, and it's important to donate to charities with a good track record that already have people on the ground near Ukraine or that have strong connections to Ukrainian organizations. Charity Intelligence Canada determines which charities are more trustworthy by following charity disaster appeals and assessing each charity's donor reports regularly. So you can go to their website to look up that information. They will report and provide information about how much money was raised in the appeal, when it was spent, where it was spent, and who it helped. So I think that's just a really, really important note to help guide you when you're trying to make that decision, because I think we all have a bit of decision fatigue. I know I do. And sometimes I need to just have someone who knows this better than I do to tell me this is a good place to go.
That's amazing. Thank you. Well, deep breath in. Hold it for 4 seconds. Thanks for hanging out with us today, Bombshells. I know we get so many messages from all of you. One of my favorite quotes is from Nicole, who said it's like having a therapy session without paying for a therapist, and it's a one-way conversation,
or having to talk
without having to talk. And I would never purport for us to be that for you, but if we can be by your side and in your hearts and minds, helping you to feel like you can do something a little bit differently that helps you to feel a bit more empowered, then we've done our job. And please let us know if you feel that way, and if you don't, also, because it's all important. Take care of yourselves, BBs, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.